Thank you for listening to Dental Marketing Theory. I'm your host, Gary Bird. Today we had a special guest, Austin Hare. I think you will enjoy listening to some of his takes. He was able to share with us why Costco and dental offices always have a great relationship. Also, is now a good time to buy versus rent, and how acquisition speed can actually be a little bit quicker if you figure out some real estate pieces. And we spent a couple moments discussing Bitcoin. Please like and subscribe. It really helps our channel, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. All right, Austin, good to see you, man.
Hey, good to see you too, man. How's it going?
Good. So we had a podcast scheduled, I think a week or two ago, and you had to cancel, but it was like the best reason for canceling ever. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, we had the birth of our firstborn child, little girl. Her name is Lena Rose Hare, and it was a little bit unexpected. She was about 2 weeks early. And so, I thought we were going to be able to go through with the podcast, but we were not. And so it worked out well, though. She's healthy. She's beautiful. We love her. Actually, the funny story, Lisa kept working out, my wife, throughout the pregnancy. And so, they tried to get her, when your water breaks, they try and get you to induce early. And she's sitting there, and she's in a lot of labor pains until they do the epidural. And then when they do the epidural, she's just kind of twiddling her thumbs, and she's like, something feels weird. The nurse walks in. She goes, "Hey, I'm gonna check on something." She opens up the blanket. She's like, "Oh my gosh!" Grabs the baby, puts it on her chest. She just delivered it on her own.
That's so awesome. Well, I'm glad it went smoothly and quickly, and you got a healthy baby. Congratulations, man.
Us too.
So Austin, I wanted you. I've seen bits and pieces of your story spread everywhere, but you have the literal dream come up into the business. I would love, and I don't want you to skip any of it. Okay. So I'm going to just frame it for you. So professional wakeboarder, a real life ninja. I had on my list soon to be father, but obviously you're a father now. And then you got into Airbnb, flipping and different things, or Airbnb hustle, which is super fascinating and cool. Something I've always wanted to do and just haven't ever been able to figure it out. Could you just walk us through how you went from those three verticals, and then now you're in dentistry real estate?
Yeah, sure. So I started wakeboarding when I was pretty young, around 12 years old. And immediately I just wanted to be a professional athlete. That was my life's goal. That was my dream. So I pursued that really hard. I continued, going to school and trying to get good grades, and went to college and all that kind of stuff. And so pursuing that led me down to Orlando, Florida, because that's kind of the hub. And so for 12 years, I got to live the dream of traveling all over the world and doing photo shoots and competing. And, that my job was wakeboarding behind the boat. And so it was great. I mean, everything has a downside. It's not it's perfect. There's a lot of work that goes into it, and your body gets hurt all the time. But overall, I don't have, very many regrets. It was I look back on that very fondly, of that period of my life. And so as I started to, while I was wakeboarding, I always like to bite off more than I can chew. And so I ended up, I bought a house in 2011, and I did what's called house hacking, which is where essentially you rent out the rooms to other people and they pay for your mortgage or then some. Yep. In this case, we got a really good deal for the house. So they were actually paying me to live in the house. And it was this cool lakefront, house, 2 stories with a pool and a hot tub and a guest house and all this kind of stuff. So it worked out really well. And then as I kind of started to get, and I kept doing that for a while. And then as I started,
so you got into that business through the wakeboarding money?
Correct. Yep. Yeah. So I was wakeboarding and, trying to save money every month. And then I had enough, pretty much scraped up enough for a down payment of a house, and it was a 4-bedroom with a guest house. So then I rented out all the other rooms, and I ended up, making money to live there. And I had the master bedroom and the best view, and, I kept my boat on the dock and all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, it was a really sweet deal.
And then, so then how did you go from Airbnb, and then how did the ninja stuff get in there? And then how did you get into the dental real estate?
Yeah. So what happened? So how I got into the, that transitioned into Airbnb. So what happened was that was working out really well. I had tenants, roommates, renting that out. So I wanted to buy another house in a little nicer neighborhood when I was looking at getting married, and that sort of thing. So I ended up buying a duplex at another place. And when I moved out, I put that one up on Airbnb. Actually, that's not true. When I moved out, I had long-term tenants at the duplex, and I was traveling for wakeboarding. And while I was gone, I was living upstairs by myself, and I'm like, let's try this whole Airbnb thing, see how it works out. So I'd be gone like
Yeah.
all the time on these different competitions and photo shoots and stuff, and the house was just always rented out when I wasn't there. I was like, oh, maybe we have something here. So eventually, I kicked out the tenants downstairs, turned that into a full-time Airbnb. Upstairs, me and my wife got married. We started living there, and then turned out the other place into a full-time Airbnb. So that's kind of like the Airbnb story. And now we're still actively looking to grow that portfolio. We have what you would call 3 doors in that portfolio. And so, but how I got into commercial real estate was I also, as I realized that my body was kind of a depreciating asset, right? Like it was getting worse and worse over time. I needed something that would appreciate. So I started some fitness centers, some businesses that I could put some time into. And so I grew that to about 3 locations, and I was looking at doing my 4th location. And that's when I met my now partner. And so what happened was we just got acquainted through friends, and we're looking for places to open up the 4th location. And I'd always kind of, flown by the seat of my pants before, where it's like, all right, I live close to this area. I think a lot of people drive by here. This feels like we're going to get a lot of clients that walking by. But what they did was they made it much more categorical and much more quantifiable. And so they just broke down all of the different data. Like, okay, what's your competition saturation here? And we're going to give that a score, right? Like, what's the population density? We're going to give that a score. What is the street visibility? We're going to give that a score. And so we really got very granular with the data, and we broke everything down into a chart. And I actually had numbers to go by the feelings. And so it wasn't just like, oh, I kind of feel good. This kind of feels expensive. It's like, no, we know exactly how much you're paying. We know exactly how this scores on the chart. And so I was really impressed with the way that they did things. And that was kind of our introduction. And so fast forward a little bit, I ended up selling the gyms in 2019. I ended up retired from wakeboarding in 2017, focused on the gyms, sold those in 2019, thankfully, before COVID. So I was lucky because I was able to get a good multiple of profits before we got out. And then I was kind of like, okay, what am I, I started investing in some projects with them, and I was like, hey, why don't he said, why don't you come work with us like full time? So that was a couple of years ago. And that's how that happened. And then kind of independently of that, my wife really liked the Ninja Warrior thing. And so it was like, while I had just sold the gyms, had a little bit more free time, was starting to do commercial real estate full time with my partners over here at Leaders. And then it's like, you know what, my body feels really good. I've been recovering. Why don't I do something to just totally abuse it so I can get back to my that I'm used to? And that's how we started doing Ninja Warrior. And so after about a year of doing that, we got the call to be on the show this year, which was just such a blessing. Was so excited. And they aired it, because you don't know, even if you get on the show, you don't know if we're going to air your run or not. But we got a whole feature, and it was great. My wife would have been doing it with me, except for the fact that somebody got her pregnant. So
she should do. There's no Ninja Warrior pregnant people. They don't do that.
Yeah, actually, what's funny is she would have done it. She was willing to do it because she was confident enough that she could fall in a way that was safe. But the producers weren't having it.
No, they that's bad PR if something goes wrong there.
Yeah, sure. that would not look good. So
then, but you got aired because you won, right?
Well, I didn't win the whole thing, right? Like, it just goes in sections, and so it's like, you go through each course at a time. And so, I was fortunate enough, I cleared the whole course and hit a buzzer, and that was great for my rookie year for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so there's times, right? You have to time out, and you get
there's times, yep. And then actually, right now, they still haven't finished showing everything. So the final, there's different stages. So the final stage is actually airing tonight. Today's Monday. I'm not sure when this podcast will actually air, but like they're still going through and they're still showing the rest of the season for the two. I guess it's called season 13.
Cool. That's awesome. Well, I'm excited to watch that. And then how did you, so at what part, so that makes total sense. So you got your wakeboarding, you're like living every young man's dream, right? And doing that professionally, you flip that into Airbnb. And then you flip the Airbnb into starting to buy some of that commercial real estate, and you meet your partner. And then how did that turn into dental? Like where did dental come into the picture?
Yeah. So my partner has been focused on like what you call medtail. It's like medical retail. So that actually encompasses a little bit more than just dental. Dental is a big part of that, right? Like dental is absolutely probably the biggest thing of what we do. But we also do a little bit of urgent care and mental health. It would also encompass like veterinary and dermatology and ophthalmology and stuff like that. And so, he's been doing this for 13 years because that's how his kind of mentor did things as well. And essentially, it's just really a largely underserved area of the market. Like when you go to trying to broker a deal for like Starbucks or Chipotle or, I mean, a lot of these fast food places, we call them QSRs, like quick service restaurants. There's a lot of competition there, all the really big names that but the medical industry, healthcare in general, is just doesn't have that that appeal, that pizzazz to it. And so we've been focused on that industry because there's so many people that need help in that industry, and the upside is just so great.
Got it. Okay. And then, so now you're in dentistry and you're starting to help dental practices find that like ideal retail spot, right?
Correct.
Got it. And then how right now with everything going on, so the real estate market's obviously really hot. How is that impacting commercial real estate? COVID and then the housing market heating up. And then what's your prediction on where things are going? I know you don't know for sure, but what's your thoughts on how things are kind of unraveling?
Yeah. So a couple questions to unpack there. In general, we are in an inflationary environment, right? Is it permanent inflation or is it transitory inflation? And I think the answer is both. There's going to be both permanent inflation and transitory inflation. Transitory inflation, to give an example, is things like the supplies, right? Like lumber is a great example because that went up so high because it got bottlenecked because the supply chains were all backed up and you couldn't get it over here and people were still having to build things to fulfill their contracts. Now you've seen that come down. I think, it's dropped like 60%, 70% from its highs back in May. So that's transitory inflation. Things that are a little bit more permanent would be like wages, right? Now, you could actually consider the unemployment benefits transitory because that's incentivizing people not to go in right now. So you have to pay them significantly more than that if you want to get them to actually work. So when that goes away, it'll be a little bit more stabilized, but there's also a push for an increased minimum wage. And then just, the Fed has a public mandate to increase inflation by 2% per year, right? So that's always going to be a thing. We're just seeing that really intensified right now. And so what that means is that it's going to drive up the price of assets. Like inflation just always drives up the price of assets and it always devalues the currency. That's literally what it is. And so what happened is we saw it really spike up the prices of real estate much faster than the average inflation rate because it was just a combination of things, right? But I don't know how granular we want to go into that, but at the end of the day, the residential real estate skyrocketed. You had anywhere between 17 and 25% year over year increases in values. And so how does that affect dental? Well, there's only so much land, right? And so as people are wanting more space and more houses and cities are growing, well, developers are going to have to buy land in that city. And that's less area that you have to develop for commercial real estate. And so what's happening is because of the high prices of labor and cost of goods and all that kind of thing, that's being directly affected or it's directly affecting the cost to build things. And so you're seeing that in terms of rent numbers. Now, I think, the cost of new development is always higher. It looks better, it's cleaner, it's in good spots, it'll last longer. But I think that we're going to see a plateau in the cost of, developing a new building in terms of how that relates to rent. So obviously, the more expensive the building, the more expensive your rent is going to be, right? It's pretty commonsensical. And so what we're seeing is just that the price of the price is being affected, right? If you want to go lease a building in a good retail spot, which is what we recommend, you're going to have to pay for it. You're going to have to pay to play. Now, I do think that things are going to stabilize. I don't think it's going to go down very much. If it was going to go down, I think it already would have, even with all these things leveling off. I think the market is going to, kind of level out. So it's kind of one of those things that you're just going to have to accept these newer higher numbers. Now, it doesn't mean you need to overpay. There's plenty of places that are asking for, significantly higher rents than they were last year. And that's one of the things you got to be careful for. But in general, it's just, if you want a good spot, you're going to have to look at rent kind of as a factor of your marketing and just play that out as okay, how can I start to view this in a way that it's more of a asset than a liability? How am I going to utilize my rent to get more patients, in a good location versus a bad location? So I know it's kind of a long-winded answer to your question.
No, it's good. It's really helpful. So it gives definitely a target to aim for. And then, commercial, your opinion is commercial real estate is going to continue to be needed, and people are going to continue to need spaces, and people are going to continue to buy. How and you said something in there, and you kind of snuck it in there. You said view your rent or your mortgage as your marketing budget. Can you go into a little bit into that and explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, sure. And either like whether if you own the location, it's your mortgage as a factor of your marketing, or if you lease it, then it's your rent as a factor of marketing. But what you want to think about is like, so let's just say that like your average patient is worth $200 a year to you, right? And so if you're looking at two different locations, one is kind of recessed, maybe it would be considered more office, it doesn't get as good street visibility. One is much more prominent, it's convenient for patients, and it's $10 per square foot more, right? So if you have a 2,000 square foot building, the difference and rent is done annually, so it is a little bit complicated math, but $10 a square foot on a 2,000 square foot building breaks down to about $1,600 a month extra, right? And if your average patient is worth $200 to you, then how many patients do you need from this location? The answer is 8, right? And that breaks down to 2 patients a week. So do you think like in a much better location where a lot more people are driving by and it's super convenient, you can get at least 2 patients a week? I think almost every time the answer is yes.
Yep. Yeah, I've seen just for reference, I've seen people go from really bad locations to really good locations in like a GP practice in a nice area, and all of a sudden start getting 40 patients a month, new patients a month, because they moved. Yeah, they were paying $6,000 more a month, but you would make that trade all day long, right? Like it was people are just coming in, they trust you, they say, oh yeah, I see you every week when I drive by for work. So no, it's definitely a great way to look at it, and a different way to look at your budget and segment it out. So that's great. Another thing that I wanted you to touch on was you have an opinion that commercial space is going to be more needed in the future, and a little bit about why that is. Could you break that down for me again and walk us through why you think commercial space is going to be more needed in the future?
Yeah. So, I mean, to go 1,000-foot overview, right? Start very high level.
Yeah.
What are some universal truths about humans? We like interaction. We're social beings. We're social creatures. We like interacting with other people. So what does that mean? It means we're going to want to go out and do things and meet people, right? We're never going to be 100% virtual community ever, regardless of how good the technology gets. So that means that places like restaurants and bars and places where people meet will always have value, will always be there. Okay. So now, what that means is you want to target those specific areas for the long term, because as long as people are going to be going there and meeting up, you want to make it convenient for the patient, and you want them to be able to see that, right? And so what is also driving up the demand for commercial real estate right now is the fact that, so we did something in 2020 when we switched to e-commerce because of COVID, where we went from a lot of, in-person retail sales to e-commerce, direct shipping, door-to-door kind of services. And so that seems like from the surface level, okay, we're going to actually decreasing the amount of real estate because everybody's going online. Well, that's actually not true. Because of the amount of supply chains that are involved, you actually have an increased demand on that commercial real estate that's taking up more spaces. And so what you're seeing is like the industrial and warehousing real estate just blew up last year, right?
Yeah.
You saw a huge demand for that. Amazon was taking over like so many warehouses, and they were building new places and all that kind of stuff. And so you did get hit in those D grade and those C grade retail markets. Like the guys kind of like in the lower end, like a lot of those guys, they weren't great locations to begin with. Some of their tenants fell behind, and then they had to close. But what happened is industrial real estate was so expensive that the C and D grade retail now became affordable for them, and they would come and gobble those up, like some malls that went out of business, turn into warehousing centers.
Yeah.
And so you're seeing the increase, those increases offsetting the different places that are getting less demand. And then on top of that, a lot of companies are wanting to do their own kind of in-house, e-commerce retail things where you have drive up, you have drive through. So you're going to have these single standing buildings like Lululemon as an example, where they can do their own e-commerce fulfillment, where people will bring stuff, drop it off and leave, or they'll pick it up, right? And that means you're going to have your own parking. It means you're going to have more space, right? And so all these things are increasing the demand of commercial real estate.
Yeah, no, so in Southern California, what we're seeing is the pop-up of what they're called ghost kitchens is what they're calling them. And what they are is they come in, they get a commercial building, they build a full industrial kitchen in there. They only post it. You can't walk up and order food, and there's no seating. you can only have Uber Eats come in and pick it up, and that's their whole business model. It's all built around Uber Eats and all of those. And we're so in my head, I'm like, oh, Uber Eats is gonna take business away, but what it's actually doing is creating new verticals and
Mm-hmm.
putting stress on those commercial properties like what you just talked about. So yeah, I'm seeing that across the board, and it's very, very interesting, and I really enjoy that topic. So great insight from you on that one. Another one that I wanted you to talk about is I've always had this suspicion in the back of my head, and you helped me kind of confirm it, is the link between Costco and good dental locations. Could you walk us through how you look at Costco and other grocery stores, and then what the relation with the grocery with the dental offices is, and how that impacts offices?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things, one of Tony Robbins' quotes that I like, among many of them, is that success leaves clues. Okay. And when you look at the biggest DSOs and the guys who are just super, super successful and what they're doing, they're going into these large anchor tenants like Costco, like grocery stores, like Publix and HEB and all these places. And so they're obviously doing that for a reason if they are successful and if they're growing and if they're improving their success. And so then break down the fundamentals, right? Like, why would they be doing that? Well, on average, a family or a mom or whoever will visit a grocery store 2.2 times per week. And so we have a saying as well that we call drive to, not drive through. So what that means is, like, if you're passing by a location, that's good for street visibility. But if you're not like physically stopping there, it's just going to be second tier. And so if you can get a spot, like if a mom or a family is going to this location 2.2 times per week, and there happens to be a dental office literally right next door to that they see, what are the chances that they're going to go there? It's pretty good,
Yep.
right? And so targeting those big companies that they've already done their demographic research, right? And then not only that, but they're driving people to their location. And so you're
Yeah.
really just piggybacking off what they've already created. Now you're going to pay for that, okay? Like the rent is expensive and it's
Yeah.
hard to get in. Like the wait list, when Publix announces that they're going to go somewhere, I mean, they've already got a list of people that are filled up. So you really got to be on it if you want to
Yeah,
get one of those retail
just for all
spots.
our West Coast peeps out there, that Publix is a grocery store in Florida. So
Yeah.
yes, but that's Costco, Costco, Publix. What are the top stores that use? Is Chick-fil-A in that conversation?
So Chick-fil-A would be what I would consider more of like a synergistic user or like a neighbor tenant. So they're not going to be an anchor
Mm.
tenant. Anchor tenants,
Hmm.
kind of by definition, would be somebody who's just like take up a huge footprint, right? Like they would take up, 30,000, 40,000, 100,000 square feet. Home Depot would technically be considered an anchor tenant. They might not be as good as a grocery store, but
Yeah.
Chick-fil-A it does drive a lot of traffic. So a lot of times what you'll see is like a Chick-fil-A is inside or close to a large anchor tenant. And if you can get those
Yeah.
things, like Chick-fil-A, Chipotle, Starbucks, those three are really great because of the fact that they drive so much traffic, first of all, but also they're a little bit more expensive than a McDonald's or a 7-Eleven coffee. And so you're going to be getting a little bit of an upper tier of clientele. Now, if you do Medicaid, obviously that's not as important to
Different
you,
story.
but
Yeah.
there's plenty of tenants that kind of fit that demographic, that kind of fit that niche of like just being good tenants, like good stores, and also high volume.
Got it. And then, so this brings up another topic. So as we move city to city, state by state, county by county, you begin to look at all these different markets. There's all these different stores. There's different consumers. You said Medicaid, you got GP, you got specialty. Why would someone use someone like yourself versus hiring a real estate locally, or finding a local real estate person and working with them? What's the difference between those two services?
Yeah, and I'll say there's pros and cons to both, right? Like some brokers are just exclusively local and they only work with local people. We just reverse that and we work exclusively with national people, right? I mean, we would
Hmm.
work with local too, but one way to think about it is a local broker is going to be very deep knowledge and know granular details about his market, and then he tries to fit his experience of healthcare into different areas within that market, right? Where we kind of flip that. We have a very granular understanding of healthcare in general and what makes locations work all around the country. And then we use that lens to look for where we might find a good location in a specific market. And
Mm.
so, if you are using a local broker, it's like either one of two things usually. A, if you might be the only dental user that he's working with, and then that's great. Now, of course, that would mean he has limited experience in dental. Okay. Now, if you're not
Yeah.
the only dental worker that he's working with, that's great. He has a lot more experience, but that means he's working with the competition, right? And so there's a trade off there. So when we're as being like
It's a good
national,
point.
yeah. So being national brokers, like we don't work with the same dental user in a particular market because we want to give them. We have the luxury of giving them exclusivity of certain trade areas because that's not the only place we do business. Oops, sorry, I lost. I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry about that.
Okay.
We were talking one time, Austin. We were talking about also having biases when you're in a local market.
Yeah, yeah. So another thing about being local is you do know the area very well, but you can also get what's called location bias. And so what that means is if you grow up in a certain area or you've been in an area for a long time, you have a tendency to think that like you know which areas are good and which are bad. And so the problem is that things are changing very rapidly in a post-COVID world. And then also every couple years, their entire neighborhoods are changing, right? And so what I mean is like a location that doesn't have any vacancy today and a month from now could have vacancy with things that have been going out of business. So it's important, like you want to continually look at places, and that means physically driving by. And so sometimes people, when they know the area, they don't feel the need to physically drive by because they feel like they know it so well. They just will get on CoStar or one of these services or whatever and kind of do a check versus like, actually physically driving. So if we want to do a deal for somebody who is in Dallas. Like Dallas is a massive city. It has 18 different, maybe even 20 different trade areas. We don't have to learn all of Dallas, right? They're not just going, usually it's like you have one or two trade areas. So we can learn 3 or 4 trade areas, you know what I mean, within 1 to 2 days of just driving the areas and finding out what's available. And so then also, you want to make sure that you're leveraging technology with Google Maps and the property appraiser to find out who actually owns these vacant buildings. And so, again, it's just a trade-off because they could be missing things that are right underneath their nose because of that location bias that we talked about.
Got it. Yep, that's great. Great content. All right, so this is a big subject, and I've heard it discussed on both ends in dental, and I've heard pros and cons, and you probably have an opinion on both sides. But I would love your insight on if I'm a dental practice and let's say I have 10 practices, or I'm aiming for 10 practices, should I buy the land or should I be renting?
Yeah, and that is a question we hear a lot. You're right. And really the answer is it depends. So, there are a lot of factors that break it to decide, like to think through. So I'll just kind of do my best at breaking it down so that anybody in this situation can have better clarity around what to look for. So number one is we're all constricted by the amount of capital that we have, right? Even Bill Gates has said that he wishes he had a year's worth of operating expenses for Microsoft. So we're all limited by capital. So when you are going to make a commercial real estate transaction, it's just a capital intensive business. When they want 25 to 30% down as the down payment, you're looking at a couple $100,000. So maybe you can buy your individual practice, but can you do that next time? Like how many of those can you do? Because eventually you're going to run out, right? Maybe you can do more than that. Maybe you can do 5, but eventually you come to a point. So it's really the question of scale, right? Like I will say, if you have a single practice and your goal is to just maximize that practice and you don't want to become a DSO, it starts to make a little bit more sense because now you're not taking away capital that you would normally allocate to growing and starting up new businesses, right? Like you're diversifying it with the asset, with the underlying building. Now, I'll also say in addition to that, it's not as much diversification as you might think because the commercial real estate is largely valued by the tenant and the lease. So it's the credit of the tenant, it's the amount of the lease and the length left. And so what happens is if something happens to your business and you own the building, not only do you lose all the value of that business, but now you've got no tenant in that building, which is going to drastically reduce the value of that building. So you're not really diversifying as well as you think. Usually the way that we coach it is look for the best location for your practice, period. Right. And so look, like in our experience, it's always the more convenient it is for the clients, for the customers, and the more easily accessible it is, the better. Right. So look for those couple of things and then if there's only anything available to buy, then buy it. If there's only anything available to lease, then lease it. But if all things are completely equal and you got 2 stellar locations, then you got to go through and ask yourself those series of questions to figure out how much do you want to grow and scale and which one works better for you.
Got it. Great. Changing gears on you. You had some comments on acquisition speed and real estate. Would you mind breaking that down for us?
Yeah. So, a lot of DSOs are growing mostly through acquisition. I would say the majority of them are growing mostly through acquisition. And so there's a couple things here. Number one, we talk about speed. So every now and then you get to a situation where the doctor owns the real estate and he wants to sell that as part of the transaction just to take some chips on the table, and that can really bottleneck the transition, right? That acquisition. And so in those situations, that's our focus and that's our niche. And so we like buying those types of real estate. And so that's something, if you can find a partner that's available to buy the real estate from the doctors as they're looking to sell, groups, like if you don't want to use us, there are groups that do that, right? And so there's groups that will buy that real estate and you can partner with them. And that way you can really speed up the speed of your acquisitions and making sure that if you're getting bottlenecked, at least it's not from the real estate standpoint. And the other thing about growing through M&A is that a lot of times when you're acquiring a new location, you assume that they have their real estate figured out. And it's true to an extent because that's why they popped up on your radar to begin with, right? They're obviously doing some things right. But a lot of times, even though they might hit your metrics that you're looking for and they might be doing well, you're still leaving money on the table if they're really not in if they're in a subpar location. And so they could be, producing more than $1 million. They could be doing several $1 million and multiple six figures in EBITDA or whatever it is. But like they could still be getting 30%, 40%, 50% more if you were to take them maybe across the street or down the road or whatever, to where you're switching from like a non-visible location to like a very visible, very client, patient-centered, easily accessible location. Sorry, I can't hear you again.
Sorry about that. So how much bottlenecking are you seeing from this? Like, is it slowing down deals by months? Is it hitting 80% of the deals, or like what's the amount of bottlenecking that you're seeing?
Yeah. So I don't have an exact number. I'm going to kind of guess that about 30. I would say somewhere between like 30 and 40% of the deals I think involve the doctor owning the real estate. So it's not the majority. And then of those, some of them, it could slow it down maybe 3 or 4 months. Some of them it slows down indefinitely, right? And so it's very situational. It depends on what the doctor that's partnering, that's affiliating with DSO is looking to get out of it.
Got it. Awesome. Okay. Got an idea here. So you're a brand new college grad. You just graduated from dental school. And you can go start a practice anywhere, right? The bank just approved you for a loan. You're already $500,000 in debt, right? From school or whatever, 200 to 500,000, depending on where you went to school. And now the bank just said, okay, we're going to give you whatever you need to go build your next practice or make an acquisition and go start a practice. What state would you go to? And then what kind of market inside of that state would you be looking at?
Yeah. So first of all, are there any areas that you have like an influence or a leg up in? Like, so if you're from, some town or that you grew up in, you're born and raised in, where people know you and you can immediately get your first few clients, your first several dozen clients that are going to give you really great word of mouth reviews. Is that a possibility? Because if so, that could really help, right? Like that could really help speedball some of the growing pains that you normally go through. But the second thing to look at would just be, the competition ratios. So what is the dentist per population in a particular area? And so like as a general rule of thumb, we like to look for 1,000 patients, 1,000 people per dentist. But there are areas that have much less than that. There's areas that have 4,000 people per dentist. And so we don't really recommend like going to very like super urban areas, like trying to go, downtown Chicago or Miami or LA or any New York, you know what I mean? Like any of those places, it's generally better. And you can get more affordable rent, when you go like a little bit outside of the secondary or tertiary markets. And then the other thing to look at is what's your desired insurance mix, right? So are you going to be doing Medicaid? Are there certain insurance companies that you want to look at? And so, Texas is a really popular place for DSOs because their Medicaid reimbursement is so good. And that's drawing a lot of lot of people to, start doing business there, and they're having a lot of success. So looking at different state laws for Medicaid is a huge one, looking at their reimbursement rates. And then of course it's the physical site, right? And so if you've kind of gone through all those things and you're looking at a couple different areas that could be all over the place, look at what is physically available in terms to lease right now. And if you're going to be trying to compete with these people, then you want to make sure that you can stack the deck in your favor a little bit by having something with all the physical attributes that you're looking for, which is great drive-by street visibility, good synergistic users, like we mentioned, like a Chipotle nearby or next door, or Chick-fil-A or Starbucks or whatever, any place like that. And then how close can you get to a grocery store that's going to be driving the average family there 2.2 times a week?
Got it. Okay. So I'm going to pin you down. So you're a dentist. Which state do you pick? Would you stay local around your family, or would you go out and say, nope, I realize there's a lot of dentists in Florida and I'm going to go somewhere else?
Well, yeah. So for me, I would probably take a holistic view at that. So there's obviously the money factor, but then there's also the personal, the lifestyle factor. And so I think Florida has enough opportunity that like I would choose to do one locally to start out with, so that I could be close to my family, right? Like my personal life, my family is important to me, so that's a factor too. And then B, I have enough people that I know that I could at least get the ball rolling, and then I believe that I'd be able to, if I was going to grow a DSO, that would be the strategy that I take, that I could then start adding more locations to that area. Because you just, like although we did talk about location bias, you still learn some things about the area that you're in. Now, if I wasn't going to do Florida, I think I might target either Texas or North Carolina. I think Texas has great reimbursement rates, but North Carolina has pretty good reimbursement rates, and they don't seem to be as saturated as Texas.
Got it. Okay, great. That's a great help. All right. So what are some of the worst deals that you've seen out there? You don't have to give me names or anything like that, but some just horrible real estate deals where people were taken advantage of, and it ended up hurting them in the long run, that now you can, from your experience, you can kind of share with people to help people make better decisions moving forward.
Yeah, in general, the worst deals that we've seen is just when the long-term goals don't meet the short-term execution plan. And so, there was somebody that we were working with. They wanted to open up immediately out of dental school with a 3,500 square foot practice, which was more than they needed to start. And this particular location was in an office setting, and it didn't have great retail components like metrics and visibility and all that kind of thing. And so what happened was this building was sold to an investment group for a premium, and that increased their tax liability because the tenants are actually responsible for the taxes in triple net leases. And so it ended up increasing their rent by a couple grand, which is significant, but if your practice is doing really well, shouldn't be significant enough to completely take you out. And so in this case, because the practice wasn't doing that well, they had a little bit more square footage than they needed. It wasn't a great location. They didn't stack the deck in their favor. This $2,000 increase was a huge problem for them. And so that ended up being like, it's not finalized yet, but it looks like it could be a deal breaker in terms of the lifespan of their practice.
Wow. Okay. And on the flip side of that, what are some of the better deals that you've seen where people really took advantage of the situation that helped their business?
Yeah. So we had a guy in the Southeast that he was like in this inline spot way off the road, no street visibility. He's paying about $3,000 a month. And so we relocated him to a better retail spot. And it was literally like a quarter mile away, right? Not far at all. But it was a little bit scary for him because his rent went from $3,000 a month to $10,000 a month. And so when you think about that, like as humans, we view things not necessarily in hard numbers as much as we do like percentages, right? Or multiples. And so like proportionally, he's tripling his rent. So it's really scary. However, what happened was the total revenue, he literally doubled his patient flow and he doubled his monthly revenue. And so what happened was, yeah, your rent tripled, right? But that's $7,000. And in return, you got 50 grand a month. You know what I mean? And so tripling a line item expense that's only 10% of your budget in order to get a 100% increase in your entire revenue is a really, really great trade-off. And so when you think about it and through that lens, it can help, make scary decisions, but that would definitely be one of the best deals that we've seen.
Yeah, that's the name of the game, right? If you can figure out how to do that, that's you're winning in a major way. And it's a great way to work through and think about the numbers in a little bit of a different way. Also, I know you have a lot of great insight on tenant improvements. Anything you'd like to share around that that would help the someone listening, and again, good deals, bad deals, and what people need to watch out for?
Yeah, TI is great, and the when you can negotiate good amounts of TI, especially in dental, where your cost per square foot to build is so high, it can really help you. It can help you scale, and it can help you grow faster, and it can help you with your loans. But you got to remember, landlords are all looking at this kind of like as an off-balance sheet loan, and so they're going to look to get that money back somehow if you're negotiating higher than they're offering, and so that usually just comes in the form of rent. And so what happens is they're kind of crunching their numbers, and they're usually going to put a little bit of interest internally on that. And so when your lease comes up for renewal in 5 years or 10 years, chances are you've kind of burned through all that TI, but now you've agreed to a 3% annual increase in rent, and that could really start to be painful if you're paying above market rent for that TI. So there's a balance there for sure, and it's different for everybody depending on your financial situation, but you don't necessarily want to take advantage of all of the TI when it's going to increase your rent, right? So I'll give you an example. Like in Maryland, there is a tenant who put $1 million into the TI for a restaurant, and it failed after 1 year. And so now we're working with a healthcare practice. We're going in there and we're clearing all that out, like clearing out that entire space to put in a medical user.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just wasted money, or it could trap you, right? You don't want your landlord using that against you because they know you're not going to move because you just invested all that money when the lease is up. So that's a big. All right. Changing gears completely on you. How do you feel about Bitcoin?
Nice. That is a good transition. So personally, I look at Bitcoin as an insurance policy, right? Insurance, like what are the chances that your house is going to burn down? I mean, almost zero. Like what are the chances that if you do get in a little fender bender, you're going to completely total your car? Probably almost zero. The chances are actually pretty good that if you just didn't pay any insurance, you pocketed that money every single month, that have more than enough to pay for that. But in case of a worst case scenario at bad timing, you want that insurance to be there to protect you. So personally, I've got about like 10% of my liquid portfolio allocated to Bitcoin as an insurance policy. And, I've been doing it since April of 2020. So it's worked out really, really well. But I don't know if I want to add a whole lot to it, because it's kind of like, what's to stop a competitor from coming in and eating Bitcoin's lunch? I mean, it has $1 trillion in market, capital allocation right now. So it's like very, very steady. It's definitely the strongest one. And I do see how awesome it is that it decentralizes finance, and you can help pull people out of poverty. You can send money across borders. So personally, I'm a really, really big fan. And I think that especially in this inflationary environment, like we talked about, we printed 35% of the US dollars ever printed were between like March of last year and right now. Like that's insane,
Crazy.
Right? Like how does that not have a negative effect on the dollar? And so I think that for me personally, I like it. I want to hold on to it. Because it doesn't really have any correlation with the U.S. dollar. And in case everything hits the fan, then it's nice to have some sort of protection. But what's your opinion on it?
My opinion? Great question. Well, I was going to ask you one more question, and then I'll give you my opinion. So you're not 100% in like moving all your portfolio into Dogecoin or something like that, right?
I don't have any Dogecoin personally.
Me neither.
But I've been wrong about that. So I would have said that I would have thought it already tanked. I have a tiny bit of Ethereum, but hands down majority of my crypto is in Bitcoin. But I'm not a big fan of the dollars, to be honest. Like I hardly hold anything in US dollars. It's either in stocks or it's in crypto or it's in real estate. And I'm investing more and more in real estate too.
That's crazy. So I'm the exact same way. I look at the dollar, if it's sitting in a bank account, it's just going to go down in value, right? So I put a lot of my resources into Bitcoin and I have Ethereum. I like Ethereum a lot. I like how it's solving problems that need to be solved, especially on like even in real estate. Imagine having a smart contract in real estate that once all the obligations are met, it would instantly go through, and you didn't need a lawyer to go through it as to make it happen. You just need the money to cross accounts. So there's a lot of cool functions in that way. To your point, I don't know if Ethereum is going to be the one that does, that figures that out, or if it's going to be some other coin. So there is some risk involved with that. I do think that Bitcoin, Ethereum, or something else is going to change financing the way the internet changed business. Right now, you remember the dot-com boom. There's a lot of businesses that went out of business, and there was a lot of businesses, frankly, nobody should have been investing in. They just didn't make sense.
A lot of cryptocurrencies are like that for sure.
Yes, exactly. So the way I look at it is this: is that in the dot-com boom, if you would have picked Google, eBay, PayPal, or businesses like that, you would have made a killing, right? But if you picked 98% of the other businesses that were out during that time, you would have failed. I look at the crypto industries the same way, and it's going to change how finances work, especially in these third world countries or countries that don't have really great monetary systems and loans and things like that. The other thing that's really cool about crypto to me is that you can put money there and you can get liquid really quick, and you can also borrow against it, and you can do it relatively easily. I've tried moving money from point A to point B in large amounts, and it's hard. Like, it takes a lot of time, a lot of energy, and there's a lot of hoops you have to jump in. Once it's in cryptocurrency, you can move hundreds of thousands of dollars at a click of a button, and it's relatively easy and cheap. It doesn't cost much to do it. Obviously, there's security issues, right? Like, you don't want your money to get stolen, and they're still figuring that out, and it's not insured. That's the big thing, is that if you put your money in a bank, it's insured up to a certain point. Crypto, you're putting it in there. The federal government's basically, hey, if it's gone, it's gone, and good luck. So that's my opinion on it. Who knows what's going to happen or how long it's going to take to happen? But there's definitely going to be a shakeup in finance because the technology hasn't caught up with the finance side of things yet, and it's just a matter of time, in my opinion.
Well, if you just, I like thinking about it in terms of decentralization. It's like, when has large, conglomerates of power like been good ever, right? And right now, every single country acts as a monopoly or a dictatorship over the monetary system. And so what you have with Bitcoin that I love for the first time ever is you have a real competitor for the US dollar. And so it's kind of mind blowing the fact that the Fed has a public mandate to increase inflation by 2% a year. Like, that's not a good thing, but they say it publicly as if it is, because
it's good if you're in debt, right?
Yes.
It's good if you're in debt. Yeah, bingo. And now if you're trying to get ahead and save your money, it's horrible, right?
Yep, and that's the average. And so that's what's so ironic about the whole thing is the average wage earner that needs the most help doesn't. Their wages are the last people. Wage earners are the last people to benefit from inflation, which means that they're not benefiting at all, right? So with inflation, you have prices of assets go up, and the prices of commodities go up, and then lastly is the price of labor goes up, right? And so they're never able to get ahead of it. And so when you have somebody who has like less than $5,000 to their name, the chances are they're not investing that in anything, right? Like they're scraping by. And so you're not going to invest that in a crypto or whatever. And so, I think that optimistically, I hope that, the central banks will look at something like crypto and think like, okay, maybe we can't just print as much as we want because it's self-fulfilling, right? Like as a politician, if you can increase the federal debt ceiling, then you can give handouts to people who are in turn going to vote for you. And the ironic part is the fact that the people who need these handouts the most are the ones who are going to end up paying the hardest because the inflation is going to hit them. And so really, and then people who are like viewed as the villains and the wealthy and the bad guys, they all own assets. And so when you print money, all it does is it drives up the value of their assets. So they benefit more, right? It's actually, you're getting money off the back of the poor when you create inflation. And so my hope is that Bitcoin kind of challenges the de facto monetary currencies like around the world and makes them, make more logical or I guess competitive decisions about what to do. And then hopefully we'll, have less inflation. We'll drive down like the amount of handouts that we're trying to give people, because all that happens is you create this huge debt and then the really wealthy, they make money in capital gains, not income. So they're really not paying the same taxes. So it's really the middle and the lower classes that are paying the income taxes to pay for the debt, but even that isn't enough. And so you have to have inflation to get out of it. And so it's just this like this house of cards that we've built that's
Vicious
just
cycle.
cycling
Yeah.
for deeper and deeper every single year. So I hope that we kind of start to unwind from some of that before it's too late.
That's awesome. Great take on that. All right. So last question for you. What's your favorite marketing campaign of all time, or most impactful marketing campaign of all time that you maybe from when you were a kid or as a teenager, something that really left its mark on you?
Yeah, actually, it's funny. The one that sticks out the most isn't, I don't have firsthand experience with it. It's the marketing campaign Bonos. And so I think like I was just a little bit younger than when like they really started to hammer that campaign. But I watched I think it was ESPN did a documentary on Bo Jackson. And
So
yeah, and so like seeing how talented that guy was and all like the clips that would have gone viral had he been born a generation later was just mind blowing. And so like looking at Bo Knows and just showing him like playing all these different sports and doing all these different things, and it just has such a good ring to it. So like right now, that one stands out to me as like as the one that's the most catchy and the most memorable.
That's all the Nike stuff from when I was a kid, and like Bo Knows was in there. Gretzky was really popular. Michael Jordan. There was even cartoons around them. I literally thought, man, if I can get those shoes, I'm going to be able to jump over a building. So those are right. When a marketing campaign can do that, that's a good marketing campaign.
That's why I'm not good at basketball. Because I don't have the shoes. If I had the shoes, I'd be in the NBA. Right.
Exactly. Awesome, man. Well, tell everybody, anybody who's listening, they want to get a hold of you, they want to get help with real estate. Where can they reach you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, sure. If you just want to learn some general stuff about real estate, we have a podcast called Commercial Real Estate Secrets, which Gary was a guest on in 2020. And so that one just has a lot of great, knowledge about what is a cap rate and should I buy or rent my location and that sort of thing. But, if you need help, like physically looking at a site or evaluating a deal, or you got questions or anything like that, just reach out to me directly. It's just a hair. And so my name is Austin Hare, like hair in your head, at leadersre.com. And it's Leaders Real Estate is the name of the company. So leadersre.com.
Awesome. Great. And I'll leave all your information down below, and we'll be posting this. And so thank you so much for coming on. Great content. And it really, really helpful. It helped me think about things in a different way. And I appreciate that.
Yeah, I love it. Happy to help. This was a lot of fun, and I appreciate you having me.